will start sharing my screen. Okay. So hi Olia. Good morning. So as we discussed, yes, in last 2 weeks we had a brief introduction of ABAP on HANA. We discussed on its multiple artifacts like ABAP, CDS, AMDP in brief. What is the system readiness that we have to check before we are sure that like the development which we would be doing would be compatible with the system. Then we learn about the new ABAP on HANA syntax. There is new ABAP 7.4 and 5 syntaxes. Our today's agenda would be the agenda for the current and the next week would be oData. So that is our plan. First, we would be completing the ABAP stack, then we would be jumping onto the HANA stack. So our agenda for this particular week and the upcoming week would be oData. So before we jump into oData, let's have a 5 minutes quick recap just to refresh everything, because ultimately whatever knowledge we have gained over last few weeks is anyway going to help us in the upcoming weeks. That is how we have actually planned the curriculum of this particular course. Okay, so in the earlier week, what we did was we started some development with some sort of inline declaration learning. That's what we learned, like how the inline declaration is done, and that's how the original the previous sort of development which we used to do using all the type declaration and data declaration was overridden. Hence, and we just make sure that all the kind of execution which is happening, most of it, wherever possible, we are pushing it till the database level. So our ultimate goal while using the new syntax would be to push all the execution cycle to database as well as the kernel level to free up the application server as much as we can. And then we develop a sample CDS by using the same OpenSQL syntaxes that we discussed, and using like the union syntax that we discussed earlier. So all these OpenSQL syntax are very much compatible with the CDS that we are going to learn in the upcoming weeks. Then in the post that week, we learn a few more things also, like the OpenSQL syntax that I just talked about maybe kind of contains string manipulation or the number manipulation or the date operation syntaxes, which is actually which we earlier used to do using the application server syntaxes. We used to get the data, loop it on to by using a field symbols and by manipulating the data as in how we want. But now we were able to like push that particular execution to database layer. Post that, once we have all the data, what we learned was how rather than using the old syntaxes, we can push all the code to kernel level, like the inline declaration that we did over here, the helper variable declaration, then the new read syntaxes that are coming up. We can handle the exceptions also over here, as well as I also taught you the default and optional parameters, which we would be will find very handy in the upcoming future, and maybe while learning the oData also, that how we can leverage the power of the new value and optional syntaxes. So we discussed the new condition and switch operator as compared to earlier if and case operator, which doesn't support any kind of assignments on the left hand side, but now the condition and switch operator using which we can do that particular left hand side of assignment by using various condition and maybe the pilot variable, like here the Sci language is the pilot variable. Then we use the value syntax. Earlier we used to use the loop at table on the source table on which we want to loop, and we want to fill the target table by doing any kind of stuff, or we want to limit the per number of columns or whatever. So that is what we can do something by using the value syntax. We can define a temporary variable by using let. We can loop on the table. We can pass the condition if we want to pass any. We can define a range by directly passing the value syntax with uh, before like without defining any kind of internal work area or anything. So that is what is everything which is possible by using the new syntaxes. Post which, we did jump onto a sample example where we had a introduction of conversion operators, that alpha, date, time, and all the conversion operators, the condition operators, and how we can pipe all the multiple operators in a single call also. So these operators can be piped up and can help us derive the required output that we are actually looking for. Then maybe in the post that as we discussed the optional and default syntax, we discuss on the optional and default syntaxes by means of which we can have a facility of defining the if else statement in the read table that we used to do earlier. And over here we can of course only limitation would be linear search is the only way by which the table would be iterating and the data would be like retrieved. Then we had a word on the with object key and with default key and with empty key additions in the type declaration. Post which we had a word on the two lower and two upper kind of translation syntaxes rather than compared to earlier the translation operator, like translate two strings and all. So that is also reducing our very much overhead. Then we discussed on the for, while, and until operator. So this is how we are very much kind of getting aligned with the new way of coding, and the Java, we are like our web coding is now getting converted to more and more like Java kind of stuff, like the shorthand operator, maybe somewhere over here, the shorthand operator. Earlier tabix was equal to like tabix plus 1. That is how we used to increment or decrement or like multiply or divide the operator. If you want to do the stuff on the same operator, if the variable is on the LHS is the same as that of the RHS. But now, if you see, the shorthand operator are coming very handy, and we can use this shorthand operator to do all those kind of manipulations. Same way, the Java kind of stuff would be we want to loop on particular, iterate on particular table, like we used to iterate on a particular array in Java by using a pilot variable and having I want to loop on a particular line until the while the variable is not reaching till the maximum number of lines count. So that is very much aligned to for I equal to 0, I is less than something, and I plus plus. That is some sort of kind of thing that we all also were able to achieve by using the new syntaxes. So when we discuss on the reduce operator, so that is all about the very new syntaxes. Maybe in the last week, we discuss on the very handy group by operator. The main headache of any developer would be to group a data on particular parameter and derive a conclusion or like derive the required output. But the grouping is the kind of thing on which developer struggle a lot in using the at start, at begin of, at end of, or maybe you are using the by storing the previous value somewhere. So here we can reduce that overhead by using the group by over here. And if we are comfortable with the older syntax, then we can use the loop at over here, or we can directly use the for in group, and that is how we can achieve that particular output. Then maybe in the very last section we discussed the mesh parameter, how we can define multiple associations in the structure parameters which we have actually defined, and using the forward association, inverse association, or we can perform the delete operation by using the internal associations which we have declared earlier. And here by using the corresponding parameter also, we can ensure that as compared to move corresponding, which just move the data from one table to another, here it also ensures that the kind of data which is getting transferred in the target table is having a kind of uniqueness. The duplicate data is not getting transferred. That is what we can ensure by using corresponding and by using the discarding duplicates. In the very last section, we discuss on the CLABAP corresponding. Here we can, like as compared to move corresponding and corresponding, where we can directly pass the table data from one table to another, but when the base condition would be the column name should be matching. But if we want to overrule that condition, and if we want to pass the data from one table to another, and we want to define the mapping and on ourselves, then that is also possible by using the CLABAP corresponding, where we can follow some sort of rules. Like there are 3 steps. First, we have to create the mapping object, create the mapping table, and once we have that particular mapping object defined, we can execute any sort of kind of data corresponding movement execution we want to perform. So that is all about the new ABAP syntaxes that we discussed. And of course, ABAP is a vast area, so it's not something which SAP would stop over here. SAP would keep introducing new and new things. So of course, for a developer, main thing would be keep on learning. So that's what we would be doing, and we would be keeping upgrading ourselves. So yeah. Hey, hi Gaurav. Good morning. Thanks for joining.
Yeah,
So, hi. So till now we had a quick brief about the ABAP 7.4 and 5 syntax that we had gone through earlier. Now we would be jumping onto the new oData stack. So our mainly the way in which we have designed the course curriculum would be we are firstly trying to cover all the ABAP stack, like which cover new ABAP 7.4 and 5 syntax. Then we would be covering the new oData part. The oData protocol. So of course I'll put all of you in lecture mode, and then we'll learn all about oData. Then in the system we would be creating a sample oData service for today. Okay. So yeah, we already have a quick recap on the new syntaxes. Now today's agenda would be we would be first learning why we actually need to learn oData. What is the requirement of oData? Then we would have a basic understanding on oData, and there are multiple keywords of it, like REST API on which actually it works, the EDM model on which it is actually based upon. Then we first need to check whether the system on which we are actually going to develop or do the oData development is actually ready for the oData development or not. Then the base tool, there can be multiple tools by means of which we can develop oData. The base tool or the tool which actually SAP suggests and SAP has actually come up with is SAP Gateway. In recent days, SAP is also coming up with certain new technologies for REST API development. SAP Gateway is the one which is currently being used in all the most of the Fiori development that has been being used. So that is what we would be. That is what that is a tool which would be our main focus in this particular training. Then we would be creating our first service, when we would be implementing our first GET call, and we would be registering our service, and we would be understanding its multiple components. So first, let's discuss why oData. Why actually do we need oData? So like of course in India, or let's say by following a multiple web series also, we have come across a scenario, or like say a mindset that like in India, whenever we start something, we never get a question what is something that you want to learn. Like first thing which we would be getting a question for, like why it is required. If it's not required, then someone won't be doing it. That's the kind of stuff that everyone is actually or everyone like that is a human mindset that has been set up. So why oData? So as an ABAP, let's say if we talk about our journey, then we have multiple we have spent plenty of years and in doing the development in SAP technical field. Now on the day when we started, the actual development was actually done on base of SAP GUI. If SAP GUI I talk about, it was a kind of reporting or module pool programming, or if I talk about the form designing also, then it was Adobe form, multiple forms of sort of stuff over there. Then if there are any kind of requirement of doing some sort of stuff on let's say RF devices, then we would be developing RM ITS services. We would be designing HTML template, but then also it was actually based on your particular module called screen that you have designed. Then post that, if I talk about the web-based development, like if I want to have particular development which won't run on SAP GUI, but it will run off on a particular browser, then my primary focus at that time was WebInfo, then the floor plan manager, FPM. That is all my focus was on those earlier days. But post that, now SAP is understanding that like all the people are doing custom sort of development. Then what is the uniformity? Each time I am developing a new software, each time I have to train a user. This is how the button will look alike. It is the purpose of this button. This is how you can navigate from screen by screen. So each time a developer is developing a new software or a tool has been coming up, the user has to be trained. So that user training activity is coming up in the very frequently, which is not good for any kind of development. Like if I have an Android mobile, all the applications would be on a particular architecture which would be very aligned. If I know how to use let's say WhatsApp, I would be very familiar by using Telegram also. I know it's a chat messenger, so of course this is all the kind of functionality it would be having. It might have one plus or one minus functionality, but of course the kind of functionality it would be working on would be same. But for that, the main thing that every application or each of the application is actually getting only main focus on which it is actually getting developed is the uniform or uniform UI. So that is why SAP Fiori or UI5 actually came into picture. It's all the development are actually done based on a particular uniform SAP component which SAP has actually designed. So when SAP UI is coming into picture, the normal ABAP directly whatever we can do can't work, because let's say if I talk about a particular UI development, okay, let's first something to okay. So let's say if I talk about a particular UI application over here. So let's say if I have a UI5 application over here, UI5 application over here, it would be running on what we call the web browser. Though it can be a on-premise or let's say cloud-based application, the way of working on it would be a web browser. Now, whenever we are running on application on a particular web browser, the way by which it would be communicating would be based on your all HTTP protocol. Okay, so the system on which we are currently doing the development is a kind of SAP GUI. Let's say if I say SAP GUI, here my SAP GUI system is somewhere lying. Okay, so this particular SAP GUI system, there is no way by means of which this can communicate. But if I talk about any, like just forget about SAP, let's understand any kind of web browser application which is running on a web browser today. Let's talk about Google. Whenever you are kind of searching something, if you are let's say typing let's say oData, it is getting you all the information related to this particular topic. How it is actually getting. So what is actually currently happening is SAP might be having some sort of its own database which is getting built up day by day. So let's say it is having some sort of database layer over here. So let's say if I talk about a database layer over here, SAP is querying not SAP, any web browser application is actually querying this particular database. But let's say if this particular database is actually getting queried, then of course our SAP GUI is not also like kind of GUI. It is also having an MVC architecture. It is also having let's say if it has a multiple layer, like database layer is also there, then we have a application layer and the UI part. So if I talk about the GUI, if we are not using the GUI, still we have left with a database and application layer. But the call which actually our system is, the browser is doing from here is not reaching till the database. So we need some sort of middleware, or we can say in our layman term, a middleman who can behave as a translator between these two technologies. Let's say a translator between these two technologies, and can translate whatever a system is asking or the user is asking, and ask that particular thing to database, and that database will ultimately return that particular result. So if I talk about the translator, let's say if I am talking about web browser, okay, so the web browser will query me something like, give me the details of oData. What is the language it would be talking? Like if I am going somewhere abroad, I am going to let's say a German country, then the base language they would be talking into Germany. But I don't understand German. So what I'll do is I'll either use a translator, or I would keep myself or a translator who would translate his stuff to me. I'll speak into English. He'll translate that stuff into German for him. So that's how it would work. So the same way over here, if you see, the language in which the system would be, the web browser would be communicating his message would be based on a particular HTTP protocol. So this HTTP protocol would ultimately is the language in which we would be getting the query. So this translator understand, okay, and on which language we actually understand the database actually understanding. So let's say if we have a SAP system, of course we won't understand the HTTP, we'll understand the normal ABAP. So normal ABAP is not something which directly it can convey, but SAP has built one more step over here on which we can directly get the ultimately query, or maybe we can say we can get the query on particular format, which can be either JSON or XML format. So if we are getting a query on which can contain a URI, a query portions which can have a header as well as a body data. Let's say if I talk about oData, it would just be a header like give me all the details about oData. But if I talk about I have some sort of information, just load everything to the database. So it will have a header as well as the body content. So same way, any kind of HTTP request would be having a header and a body request, which directly in HTTP protocol we won't be understanding. But if I have a JSON or something protocol over here, which let's say is coming from here, then we would be directly getting it translated to the language that we would be understanding. Because if we talk about the JSON, and then here we have one more translator that is called oData gateway, and that particular oData NetWeaver gateway, SAP NetWeaver gateway, it would be converting this particular query for us. It will receive the query in form of JSON or XML only. That will I'll show you. But ultimately, for us to understand, whenever we are reaching on to a particular application server part, because this is a database part, right? A directly JSON or XML component can't directly talk to database. We need some sort of application server over here. So if this is a particular NetWeaver gateway, then it will convert this particular query which I am receiving over here. The output of it would be a normal ABAP query. We can receive ABAP query over here. From this particular portion, we would be receiving ABAP query. That ABAP query can contain, let's say, if oData is like the system is asking for oData, we would be getting from where. Like we would first need the location from where we need to track. Because if I am querying a particular database, I would be querying from which table I want to derive the data. So that is something we can call as a location, or in oData terminology we can call it as an entity, because all the query we would be receiving would be based on an entity. Second thing, we would be receiving like what sort of information, whether we want a multi-line data or single line. Let's say if I'm querying a database would be having a table. A table can have a particular list of keys. So if I am getting a query based on a particular key parameter, then the output which I would be getting would be single line. So that is what we call a read operation. So this read operation would ultimately return us the single parameter output. But what if the kind of query which we are receiving over here is not a read operation, but it's a give me all the results regarding oData from regarding oData. It means we are bound to receive result which can vary from 0 to n. So it means it's not a read operation, it's a query operation. Then it's not always that like a particular operation or the request we would be getting is for get data only. We can receive a request from a browser saying, okay, let's say if I have a purchase order, you can say that like, okay, I have filled all the information in a particular purchase order for its, let's say, document date, its vendor and all those stuff. Now just fill this information in a particular table, let's say EKQ. Okay, so what we would be doing is we would be directly pushing this information into table that can either, if purchase order is already existing, then it could be update request, else it would be a create request. So that is what we call a particular post request, or we can say a put request. So ultimately the brief or this all the discussion is there is a language which a web browser understands, and there is a language which a database understands. Database understands nothing but a language of an application server. So that application server needs a particular input provider which can, one second. Okay. So so we need a particular translator which can reach to application server, and this application server will ultimately query for us to the database. This database will give the results to application server, and it will again give it back to the NetWeaver gateway, and it will again get translated to your particular oData, and this oData is something which a browser would be understanding. Why? Because if I say oData, then what is the full form of oData? Let's talk about that. Like oData is nothing but your open data protocol. Open data protocol. So this open data protocol is, first of all, like just understand open data protocol. It says open data is a global data which anyone can understand. And now what is a global understandable format? It can be either JSON or XML. So this global understandable format is something in which oData actually communicates. Second thing, oData is not something which is kind of a product of SAP. It was earlier introduced by Microsoft. Then SAP acquired it some time back. So as Microsoft invented it, and then SAP is able to use it, it means it is not having a format which is actually kind of only known or understandable Microsoft, and SAP is also using it, means it's not also a format which actually only SAP can understand. Because oData can communicate in JSON or XML, it means whatever kind of communication we would be doing would actually get trigger a request in sort of JSON or XML, and the ultimate output we would be getting would also be in JSON or XML. If I have a JSON, then how a JSON would look like? A JSON can have a, let's say, data in key and value pair. Okay, so let's say if I have a EBLN, or let's say to make it more simpler, let's say if I have a BUKRS, I can have a plant, let's say 0010. So I have a key which says key, okay, the company code is BUKRS, the data is 0010. If I talk about oData, if I have a, let's say, property called full form, and the value is let's say open data protocol, and any system would be able to understand, like if I need a property saying full form, this full form would be the value parameter, that would be open data protocol. That is what any system would be able to understand. For that, all we need to do is we need to trigger a right set of requests. That request can be either we can trigger a get call, we can if you want to retrieve the data, if you want to update some sort of data, it would be a put call. If you want to create some sort of data, it would be a post call, and if you want to delete some sort of operation data, then it would be a delete call. But if we slightly look back into our college days, or some the days when we used to learn HTTP, we understand that like this particular protocols are nothing but in the way in which a particular browser will communicate. So it is a way of communicating for all the browsers. So it is a kind of HTTP or HTTP way of communicating, or you can say a REST API way of communicating. Secondly, for database we have something called ODBC. Okay, so ODBC is a kind of protocol using which a database can do all the operation. So this particular database way of doing operation would be, I can ask a database to get me some sort of data, so insert a data in a particular database, to update a data in particular, update a information on a particular record, or I can ask a database to delete a particular activity. So this ODBC was ultimately used for any kind of operation we want to perform on database layer. Same way, these get, pull, post and delete call are something that we are actually getting for any kind of operation that we want to perform on a particular web base. So ultimately, if you see, these are HTTP, these ODBC. So if I talk about if I want to connect HTTP to ODBC, I can say that our oData is the only way of communicating. It means our oData is nothing but it's a ODBC for web. Sorry, it's a nothing but our ODBC for web. So a web browser or a, let's say, web request which I am getting for getting a data, it's ultimately reaching till the database by passing these layers. It's passing the translator which is converting a request, it's reaching the application layer, and this application server is ultimately triggering a ODBC request. This ODBC request is ultimately triggering the same request. Like if I ask for a get information, it is triggering a get call over here. If I talk about the post operation, it is triggering an insert operation over here. If I talk about put operation, it is triggering update request over here. Of course, its format might differ, what a get request would be needing, what put and what post and what delete method would be needing, that we would be learning further. But if you see this sort of operation which any kind of browser or web API can do, the same thing ODBC API is already doing. The only thing, only difference is earlier it was doing on database layer. Now we have to enforce some sort of architecture by means of which it can reach the database, and that is why the oData protocol is coming into picture. And this oData protocol is actually helping us to ask the particular web request to query that particular database by means of this particular layers. And that's why this particular oData is the middleman using which the web browser can query its particular request directly to the database. Whatever output the database is giving, we can directly push it back till the browser, and this browser can show the data over here. So that is the way of communicating. That is why we call it as a ODBC for web. Okay. So if I talk about ODBC, then let's say there are certain. Okay. So the main terms which we learn today is like the oData. oData is nothing but your what we call it as a open data protocol. Okay. One thing is open data protocol. Second thing that we learn on something is ODBC. So it's open data connectivity. So we want to do any kind of operation which connect to the database. The request might be coming from anywhere, but ultimate operation that we would be doing is get, insert, it would be get, put, post or delete, any kind of operation that we would be doing. That is why oData is called ODBC for web. Now all these operations what we are doing are on web protocol. So any kind of operation on web protocol which you would be doing can be based on two APIs. Either it can be on REST API or it can be on SOAP API. That is a basic maybe knowledge we used to carry in kind of days when we used to learn the networking. So this REST API, it's something that we call representational state transfer. Okay, representational state transfer is something which we call the REST API. Then the SOAP API, which would be a single object access protocol. Now The only difference is representational state mask for your REST API is stateless. Let's say stateless, how we can define a stateless API. So stateless is something which doesn't remember what is has been communicated earlier. Let's say if I talk about a human, if I have come to you saying like, hey man, give me this stuff. Like if I want something, or let's say if I want a let's say a pen from you. Like if I just give me a pen, yeah, like you say like I don't have it right now. I'll give it to you whenever I have it the next time. So next time when I come to you, you would be remembering, yeah, last time you have come to me, I was not able to give you a pen. This time I would give you priority. If I have a single pen, I would give it to you. So it's a kind of thing that our human mind is remembering. So our human mind is kind of a stateful. The operation we are doing is on the mode of stateful. It is human mind, not this one. So this is not the same. These are kind of two opposite things. So this stateless API is the API which doesn't remember what has been communicated earlier. All of its calls are independent to each other. Let's say if I am querying a particular purchase order, let's say if I put a like if I place a GET request on a particular purchase order EKKO, if I am querying a first time a particular purchase order, let's say 1 2 3 4 5. Next time if I again trigger a get request, like the second number of get request, saying give me all the data where BUKRS is equal to 1010. So it won't be having any memory or any trace of what was the call that you have triggered earlier. If I have a, let's say, multiple backend requests triggering one above the another, all the get requests will get executed independent of each other. So that is what we call stateless. It doesn't remember the state of its earlier request, or we can say that it's all the request execution. All request execution would be independent of each other. It means if I have 5 requests, those 5 requests would work independently. I would get an input parameter, the request will get executed, it will throw me the output. But if I talk about a SOAP API, so that's why this is called resource-based kind of API, because all it is dependent on its resource. Like I have a data which is ultimately a resource for a system. That particular resource for an input request, if I am having the data, I would be returning it to. If I don't have the data, I won't be returning it to. If I have a operation like put, post, or delete, then I would be performing onto a particular resource if I am having it, or I can create a resource for it also. But all the operations that we would be doing would be a resource-based operation. Whereas the single object access protocol, SOAP API, would be doing all sort of operation based on an action API, which would be action based. Now, how action based? Let's say why we call this oData or open data protocol, because irrespective of what is your UI technology, as I already mentioned, like you have a HTTP protocol which is running on the web browser. Though we are using UI5 for a few for our SAP application, if SAP is coming up with new technology, or let's say if I have a particular JSON output, let's say the oData is returning a JSON output. This JSON output, if I am having, though the front end technology is UI5, I can use it. But if the front end technology is not UI5, it's any other non-SAP technology also. If it's any other non-SAP technology also, then also the system would be able to use it, because it's first of all open data technology, and anyway all web browsers understand the JSON or XML kind of format data. So that is why it's called open data protocol. So hence the system is not dependent on what is your actually backend. Ultimately what it is dependent on whatever resource you are providing. But here if I talk about single object access protocol, let's say talk about a scenario when you used to have a particular application which used to communicate only in the let's say first scenario, when system we used to communicate on only on the SAP GUI. Okay. Now our client is now more comfortable by using application which is based on a particular application. Let's say he's comfortable by using PHP application. They are already using a different application which is PHP based. Now they are fond of converting all the application to PHP. So what they'll do is they'll just ask you, hey, we want to convert this application to PHP. So you will say like, how I can ensure that the data which I am having in the SAP GUI, I am like returning it to you at PHP level. So ultimately what we used to have earlier is we used to have a RFC remote function call, or we can have a, let's say, remote procedure call. That is what we used to perform kind of operation earlier. We used to let's say if I am triggering on a save, I'm clicking on save button, then you will define an action at your SAP GUI, and like you will form a function module, let's say ZFM on save click, and it will return all the data, or let's say process all the data on particular save click. And you will ask this particular PHP developer to integrate this particular function module with your system, and it will ultimately do whatever operation it is looking for. So this is action based. Now let's say tomorrow a particular Java application is coming into picture. A Java application is following a different set of rules or different set of architecture it is having. So ultimately you would be needing some sort of different, let's say you are having some sort of XAMPP server or something which is internally placed. Then you have a Java architecture. Let's say, so not XAMPP server would be compatible with Java. Let's say Tomcat server, which is there for the Java. Then this particular Java application is not having kind of save function. It is performing some sort of different function. Let's say if it is having a function called validate and save. Okay, so what you will do is you will define another function module and all those stuff. But if I have a REST API, it is not action based, it is resource based. All we can provide is we can provide an entity, or let's say resource if I name about, let's say purchase order header data. Let's say this is my entity. It will have its multiple operation. Let's say create operation, on create operation what our API would be needing and what it will create. Then create, update, delete, let's say read and query. So what all it would be doing for a particular request, it has already been defined. Now you can come up with any kind of PHP call or Java call, doesn't matter. You have this API. You can, if you want to do some sort of validation, you can trigger my read request, validate whether the data you are sending is correct or not. And once the read request has been completed, you can directly trigger my create request. So whatever, or if you have just you want to perform some operation on save click, you can directly call my create operation. That is all independent. So for whatever front-end technology that has been changing, we are not required to do any kind of new development for it. And that is why it is called resource-based operation and not action-based. Yes, contrast to which this particular SOAP API is action-based, where it is resource-based. So the particular oData which we will be talking about is totally based on your resource-based operation and not the action-based. So and the operations that we would be able to perform would be create, update, delete, and read and query operation. That is all about the operations. So maybe, yeah, this is all about your communication between the browser and the database layer by using the oData as a particular middleman, and difference between REST and SOAP API, and how a particular resource-based API is more convenient to use than action-based API, the SOAP API. This is all about it. Maybe this is some sort of basic knowledge that would help you in future also, because if I talk about any technology in future, let's say SAP's, let's talk about SAP, because even after spending this many years of SAP, we would be planning to grow ourselves in a SAP world only, and we won't be like less likely to switch to another technology as much as possible, right? So we would be keeping ourselves upgrading in SAP world. Okay, so now as SAP is moving on to more of web based development, SAP is releasing more and more patches for, or more and more like it's defining more and more technologies for the new web-based. Sorry. Okay. I was not able to type. Okay, fine. So now ultimately SAP is releasing more and more technology in a which is mainly based on a oData protocol, the REST API. After SAP NetWeaver Gateway, NetWeaver Gateway, we used to we have also oData based CDS based oData, which is already in place, that we would be discussing in the upcoming lectures. Second thing we are currently having is just recently SAP maybe in 2017 released a new particular cloud-based technology like CAP. So that is for cloud application programming, and it is also based on a we can say REST API only, because all it is defining multiple. There also we are defining multiple entities, and we are ensuring all these operation as getting taken care of properly. Then in 2020 itself, SAP defined a new technology called RAP. So that is how SAP is ultimately upgrading. Now the base thing for all these technologies which is actually coming up in market is REST API, or you can say the data protocol. So the REST API is something which if you are very clear, there can be many more things also coming up, like associations, annotations, all those stuffs are there. But all we should be very clear about the base thing. The base thing would be how we can handle these multiple operations. If you are very clear on this particular base stuff, if your basic is clear, then we would be very comfortable in using any technology, irrespective of whether we are converting OData, creating OData using a gateway or CDS or CAP or RAP. It doesn't matter. All we should be clear about is the REST API. So are we all clear? I have unmuted all of you, so maybe if you have any query, we can have a discussion. Okay. Okay, perfect. So it seems like everyone is clear. Great. So we would be moving on to our next topic then. Okay. So first we discuss why oData, then what is a REST API and all those stuff. Third thing we would be discussing is EDM model. But let's park this topic for now, because EDM model, it would be easy for us to easy for you to understand whenever I am showing it to you in the system. Okay. Next thing, we would be directly jumping onto system and checking whether our system is actually ready for the oData development that we are talking for so long. Okay. Okay. So let's jump onto a system. When SAP introduced oData, it actually came up with certain component, because for any, let's say if I have a Fiori, it should have some sort of UI component already installed in our system. Same way, after introduction of oData, SAP actually asked us to upgrade our system, and there are certain components which SAP is actually installing on our system. If we have that particular components available on our system, then we would be able to do gateway level development for a particular oData services. So those components we can say as let's say if we have a particular system older than NetWeaver. Now let's say if I have a system whose version is, let's say, prior to NetWeaver 7.4, then in that case the base component that we would be requiring for doing any kind of gateway level development would be GW_core. Then we would be needing INFND. Then we would be needing IWBEP. So these are three components we have to ensure whether our system is having it or not. If the system is not having, then we need to upgrade our system and we can ask our basis consultant to get this component installed for a particular gateway development to work. If our system is post 7.4, or let's say it's any kind of new HANA system, it's SAP has combined all these three components into a single component, saying SAP GWF FND. So this is a component which is the mandate. So if we have these components into the system, then we would be able to do any kind of development into a system for gateway development. So let's go into the system. We can go into system status. We can go into here SAP system data. You would be finding some sort of product version. Here you can check. Okay, we have SAP GWFND already in place. So we have Gateway Foundation 7.40 already installed. So we would be able to do any sort of development for the gateway level. Okay. So this is a kind of system prerequisite for a gateway-based operations to work. Then the basic transaction for gateway-based development would be SCGW. So let's start jumping onto that particular SCGW. Okay. Now we would be, one more thing to mention is, if we are missing onto any kind of configuration into the system, you can check on SAP Note. Now you can say S Note 189. Then we would be having 6961. So these are SAP Note which SAP has actually released, which contain configuration for SAP Gateway that you can follow, or you can ask your basis person to follow to get use a system which is in place for the proper development. Configuration for SAP. Okay, so this is the SAP node which guides you for all the particular setup. Okay, now as we are already in SCGW, this is a transaction which we would be using for all the sort of gateway-based development. How we can remember is like SAP's all the transactions are based on, let's say, starting from SC, and it's for gateway. So that is what the SCGW means. It is SAP for gateway, SCGW. Let's say, okay, now we have multiple options over here. If we have already an existing project we want to open, then we can, this is nothing but our workspace. Okay, so over here, if you see, I have multiple favorite transactions already mentioned over here. I can have another menu or all those stuff. This is my user menu. Same way, this is my workspace. If I am working on a particular project frequently, or if I have created a project, then I can create a project. I can open a project if I want to edit in on my workspace. Next time when I will be coming over here, I would be getting that project available. Let's create a project. Okay, so over here we would be creating a project, let's say YGW, so YE0, let's say T01. So okay, here we have multiple kind of projects available. In most of the system, if you have very older system, you would be seeing the only two project types: service with SAP annotations and service with vocabulary based annotation. The new annotation model for reference service is maybe after SAP 7.8's introduction. This was actually introduced. So if you are having any system older than that, then that particular option won't be available for you. And this is oData 4.0 service. So any particular project or any particular product, let's say if I am developing something, it would be having any sort of version, just to ensure that whenever there is a patch or bug or like any kind of upgrade is coming, it is aligned, or like we can distinguish it easily. So the common oData version that all mostly are oData services defined maybe till now is working on is oData 2.0. Now, why 2.0? There are certain things which are introduced in oData 4.0 also, but 2.0 is more preferable. oData 2.0 version more preferable. Reason being all the Fiori elements. So any UI5 developer would help you to understand this. All kind of Fiori elements. Let's say if I name a few like list reports and all its annotation are actually supported very easily on oData 2.0. whereas on oData 4.0, Fiori elements are maybe not supported yet, or maybe their SAP is planning to release some sort of new component which can support the 4.0. So as we are talking about the uniform UI, uniform user interface, oData 2.0 is the kind of in the system you will find 98% of your oData application which are actually defined in a oData 2.0. And if you have an older system, then it would be 100%. Maybe you can define a service in 4.0 also. Now, another thing, project type. So project type, there are four kind of project types. One is service with SAP annotation. What are annotation? First of all, annotation is something which can give you enhanced feature. Like if I have an entity, if I have a let's say entity, I can say purchase order. Purchase order is an entity for me. Entity is nothing but a particular set of a particular let's say object which can contain multiple property. That's what we can maybe define it as, like, because if I have an object, it can contain multiple if I have a object, it can contain multiple attribute, plus it can contain multiple methods. Same way, if I have an entity, it will have a multiple properties defined at its properties level, plus it would be having multiple handler method. That's what I mentioned earlier, like create, read, update, delete, or query. That's what we call it as a CRUD queue operation. So this particular CRUD queue operation that we can perform would be based on an entity. So this particular entity, at annotation level, you can define something like, at annotation level, you can define whether the particular operation you want to perform. Let's say if I want to perform any sort of filtering. Let's say if I have a purchase order, I want to filter the data based on a particular BUKRS company code. Then SAP is coming up with some sort of inbuilt annotation. So as I say, the Fiori elements which are supporting the annotation, if this particular parameter is not set as a filterable, then at Fiori element level you won't be able to filter the data. Of course, this is all related to Fiori elements. If you have not set a parameter to filterable over here, and still you want to pass you want to filter the data, then it will work, not an issue. But directly if you are using a Fiori element short of UI, then you won't be able to find the filter altogether. Okay, that we'll see everything in picture. Then these are standard SAP annotation that can be creatable, updatable, filterable, nullable, and all those stuff. Then SAP is coming up with some sort of vocabulary based annotation also. Those vocabulary based annotation can be if you want to define a sort of label for a particular text, and label for a particular text, and if you want to define a particular value list for a particular, let's say if I have a company code, while searching a particular value list, I want to ensure that whatever particular BUKRS filter is coming in pop-up, I should be able to see all the valid company code list. So that is what we call the value list. So all those kind of annotation you can provide in vocabulary based annotation. Third thing, which we are currently having over here is annotation model for reference service. So as I already mentioned, like over here, this is a service with annotation. This is type 1. Okay, over here, right here, if you see, this is a kind of service with vocabulary based annotation. So these are custom annotation. So these all standard service with SAP annotation, where SAP actually take care of your functionality. Service with vocab based annotation. So this vocabulary based annotation which is actually which contains the standard SAP annotation plus custom annotation. I have already mentioned, like you can define a custom labels or value list or all those stuff. And third kind of thing or third kind of gateway service is reference annotation, annotation model for reference service. Okay. So what is the annotation model for reference services? Whenever we have, let's say, define a service with SAP annotation, because this is the first preference, most of the services are defined with this particular, because ultimately what we want to ensure is all the kind of development which we are doing is aligned with SAP standard. So all the SAP annotation, whatever SAP the handling SAP is doing, we want to ensure that like that is also in properly in place. So this is SAP annotation. But if we are coming up, if we are coming across any kind of requirement where we want to introduce any sort of custom annotation for any sort of requirement, then if you have already defined a service, then you can't directly go and change the type of this service. Let's say if I am defining a project over here, and if I have generated the project, then you won't be able to change this type of project once you have defined and generated the service. So in that particular scenario, let's say after developing a service 2 years down the line, you have a requirement of defining an annotation. You can't like scrap this particular project and start all from beginning, right? So SAP is coming up with something called annotation model for reference service. Here you can define a separate service which will refer to that service as a reference. Internal reference you can define, there is an option. And annotation model for this service would be containing all the annotation related information. So this is ultimately segregation of your backend logic as well as the annotation part. And fourth part is the oData 4.0 service. So this is nothing but a as I mentioned, oData is coming into two versions, 2.0 and 4.0, which SAP actually supports. 3.0 is also something there, but maybe currently SAP only support 2.0 and 4.0. So base are 2.0. 4.0 is newly just introduced, and 4.0 which doesn't support Fiori element. Here you can whatever service you define and generate and whatever kind of development you will do, the final output service that will get generated would be having a kind of data version as 4.0 if you select this particular option. This is the most preferable and based on SAP standard, so we would be using this for our tutorials. Next thing, okay, let's create a particular project. So sample gateway project. You can specify project over here, or if you want to do sort of local development, then you can define it as a local project. Okay, so this is kind of a project repository that will get created upon creating a project. So if you see, it is having multiple information. So to give one more information, like on the system architecture as we are talking about. As we are talking about system architecture, so system, while doing SAP development or let's say development for any kind of gateway service, the architecture can be of two types. It can be an embedded one. It can be an embedded system, or it can be an hub-based system. Okay, so this is an application server on which we are doing kind of gateway service development. So once we have defined a kind of service, it will create a particular service in my runtime artifacts, and that particular service I have to like once I have let's say define or let's say created a project, it will generate some sort of runtime artifact. One of it would be let's say project underscore SRV. So this is your service. So this particular service needs to be registered. You have to register this service, because let's say if I talk about the web browser, or if I talk about the SAP UEFI application, you won't be giving the name of this particular project to your front-end developer. You would be giving the name of its endpoint. Endpoint is a term where actually a service is actually getting registered. It will generate a URL. So this particular endpoint you would be communicating to your UI developer. Okay. So once we have if we have an embedded system, then the service registration part and definition part, both of it would be in a single system. So you will have a single system for service development as well as its registration, where your actually front-end system would be communicating. If you have a hub-based system, then in that case, all the service development which you in the hub-based system, you would be having two systems. One is your backend system, and second would be your gateway, or you can say front-end system. These two systems here, these two systems ultimately would be communicating by means of gateway. By means of RFC connections. So these two systems, if you go in SM59 and check the connection settings, then you would be able to find a RFC connection, which we would be linking. Like if I have a particular system, this is a hub, let's say gateway system. So if I talk about it as VDG, then it would the backend system. Let's say if I talk about it as a D1 system, then you would find in gateway systems RFC connection a destination for this particular D1 system. So these are communication. These systems are communicating directly using RFC connections, and the call you would be receiving from front end UI5 application would be reaching this particular system. So ultimately, if you have a particular UI5 system, then you would be having a kind of cloud connector setup. In a cloud connector setup, the kind of destination which you would be specifying would be for this particular gateway system. If you have a kind of embedded system in which the backend system as well as the gateway system would be installed on the same system, it would be installed in over here only, and then there won't be required RFC connection won't be required. But the issue would be we won't be able to segregate the backend logic and this particular logic. Both will reside in a single system over here. So these days, the more preferable way of development is a hub-based system. But ultimately, the only difference we would be seeing is the here, if I want to register any service, I would be specifying its RFC destination. And here, if I want to register any service, I would be using the RFC destination as local. Okay. So let's create a service. While registering, we would be seeing everything in picture. So this is something what we call the entity data model. Yeah, man. Shit. Yeah. Yeah, Gaurav. So if you have multiple backend system, and that is the purpose of having hub-based system. Let's say if I have a particular multiple backend system, if I am let's say D1 and D2, then this is a particular gateway system. In gateway system, I can define RFC connection, RFC destination to D1. I can define an RFC destination to D2. Then while defining a service, or I can say registering a service in a gateway system, we can define a system alias, and that particular system alias we can directly define, we can directly specify the RFC destination for that original service. So once we have that destination specified, whenever we are receiving a front end request from a front end system, from that front end system would reach till this gateway registration. This gateway registration would be having the system alias from where it would identify, okay, it's all the application server logic is, and its database table, its database system is actually based in D1 and not in D2. So all its call will be deviated to or redirected to the D1 system by means of RFC call. If we have a service which is actually created and developed and generated in D2 system, then it's in the registration part you would find a system alias which would be actually redirecting it to the D2 RFC connection, and RFC call would happen for any kind of service call from front end to backend system D2. So there is some sort of system alias which would be doing this stuff for us. So multiple, that is the purpose of having maybe hub-based system. So we can ensure that like multiple, though we have multiple backend system, we can have a single gateway system which would be doing all kind of registration parts. Are we clear? I would show I would show the same thing in the system, so it would be more clear to you. Okay. Okay. So okay. So over here, if you we'll just, I feel I have already created a project YE0. No, it doesn't exist. It seems. Okay. So this particular project is in place. Okay. Okay. So this is what we call a project, and here the data model, it contains multiple entity, and that is why this is something what we call entity data model. The common term you would be hearing whenever doing any kind of gateway based development, EDM, it is entity data model. It is a data model which consists of multiple entities and its relations. So I'll quickly show you. This is entity type. These are the entity type which you can maybe refer to as or consider it as a entity type. You can consider it as a let's say work area. If I have a normal report, I can have a work area which will contain a single line information. So that is the same thing. Entity type is what actually referring to. Entity type is a single line information, whereas entity set is nothing but your internal table. Like just to give you a overview, or let's say give you an idea of like how it would be, what is the difference between entity type and entity set. Type is a kind of structure containing individual columns, a kind of structure, and this you can consider it as a table. This is a structure and a table. Internal, you can consider it as a work area and an internal table, or you can consider it as a structure and database table. So that is what entity type and entity sets are. Now multiple entity, let's say if I talk about a particular, let's say PO header, and I have a PO item. Then if I have a particular PO header and PO item, then this particular two information would be communicating or related to each other by means of something called the association. So association is nothing but a particular relation between two entities. The relationship between two entities, and this association can be like, if I have a PO header, I can have a one PO header, and I can have a let's say 0 to n. I can have a 0, 1, 2 or n number of line items. So I can have a 0 to n number of line items. So this is what we call cardinality. From primary entity, that is PO header, there can be 1 to n number of entries. So this is what we call cardinality, and that is how the association is defined. So association and navigation, we will be considering in the upcoming lectures, but like just to give you an overview what this associations actually means of this particular directory or folder would contain the relationship between multiple entities. So over here I can create a sample entity. Let's say if I want to create, I can directly right click on this particular entity model, and I can, if I have a data model, I can directly import the data model. Would be nothing but your ultimately XML file. If you have it from another project, then you can consider, but ultimately basic way of defining entity would be you can directly define it using some sort of function modules or RFC, or you can define it using some sort of DDIC structure also. So let's consider, I want to let's first give a statement to our development which we will be doing. It would be easier for us to visualize what we are actually doing. Let's say we have a UI application, or you can say dashboard. Okay. So this particular UI application or dashboard, the purpose of it, let's say front-end developer says I want to define a, or let's say create a Fiori application, or let's say Fiori list report. Okay, this Fiori list report, in this Fiori list report, I want to just show the PO header information, header data information, how many purchase order has been created, and all. If I have a, let's say, from a all the purchase order information would be served using this particular application. And second thing, if I pass let's say multiple filters, let's say if I pass a particular company code, then my list of purchase orders should get filtered based on this particular company code. So this, let's say we can define it as a filter. So this is the requirement of front-end application. Now as a back-end developer, we first need to identify what is something which we can provide to them. So we have to define an entity for PO header data, and this PO header data, in this PO header data we can write the logic to derive the PO header information. Okay, so here if I have, let's say, PO header, and we can define a EKQO, let's define it as a type EKQO, a web structure. We can define a custom type also. We would discuss in detail in few sometime whether defining a or referencing a table would be a good option, or referencing a structure would be a good option in a web structure, because we can define anything over here. So we would click on next, and the default tick would be create default entity set would also be there, because as I already mentioned, internal table particular entity is nothing but your single line, and work area or entity set is nothing but your internal table. So for any entity type, there we would need an entity set to return multiple lines of information. So let's say in EKQ we want to return EBLN, BUKRS, BSTIP, BSART, and let's consider information till this year name. Then we can select these lines of information, click on next, and here we have to define a key. So this key would be something, let's say, what is a key? Let's say if I talk about a primary key, a key is something using which we can define a particular parameter which will distinct all the records. So over here in PO header, what would be the key? It would be EBLN. There is no rule you can define a particular EBLN, BUKRS, but our ultimate goal would be to defining a particular key using which we can distinguish individual record. If you define multiple keys over here while reading a particular record, individual record, you have to pass that multiple parameter in output. So keep the key as optimal as possible. That is a base rule. I just click on finish. So if you see, it just got me created two information. In entity type, I am getting a PO header, that is the name of entity, and I am getting PO header set, that is the name of entity set. I am having multiple information, let's say PO header over here. Okay, so this will give me the information of that particular entity. What is the name of entity, to which structure is actually it is related to, what is the type of entity, whether it is abstract or it's a thing or media, or what is the kind of information. Then what is then here, over here in properties you will be able to find all these properties. As you can see, the type over here defined is EDM, the entity data model dot kind of different type that we can have over here is we can have binary, boolean, byte, and all those stuff. And whenever we are defining it using a structure, system will automatically find a compatible type that, with above DDIC to the gateway EDM type. So this mapping will already automatically be done by system. This is a data type for it. Like for DDIC, it is a data element which actually we are currently which we would be referring to. For EDM, it would be code type. Then next thing, we can specify, like if I have a EBLN, then what is the size? Like if I don't specify any maximum length over here, then this would be a kind of string with unlimited number of characters. But ideally, SAP specified it at what is compatible with the DDIC element that we specified. Over here, EBLN is of char length 10. So that's why the system specified it as a EBLN, and maximum length of it is 10 characters. Over here, date time. So by default, you can specify only date element in the gateway level. The data type that will get created is a timestamp that will be a combination of date and time. Then it would be a YYMMDD, and plus giving one more character precision, SAP automatically generated it as a 7 characters. Next thing, we were discussing of the SAP internal annotation. So while defining any kind of front-end property, there are certain annotation. Which actually system automatically check the Fiori application. There is a whether the element like should be creatable. Like while creating a particular application, how the UI developer would be developing an application. Let's say if I have a particular UI application, there is a kind of list report, and if I have a particular create button over here. Let's say if I have a particular create button over here, whenever I click on create button, a object page, a page would get opened. That is something what we call an object page. This particular object page can contain multiple parameters. If it's a list report, it will check on the metadata of what all parameters can I create or can I pass the value for. So that is something the creative if you have already specified the creatable parameter for it, then it will get visible. Whenever let's say if there are 10 records or let's say multiple records being shown for a particular purchase order, if they want to change some sort of information, that information, let's say if I click on this particular line and I have not set updatable for this BUKRS, they won't be able to change the company code for this purchase order. So if I set it to updatable, it will get updatable. If I have a particular list report and I want to ensure that all these properties, user should be able to sort it by EBL, or if user want to sort the data by company code, it should be able to sort. Then you have to set this particular property to sortable. If you want the data to set filterable, like if I want user to filter the data based on BUKRS company code, then I have to set it to filterable. So that is something what we call the inbuilt annotation. Nullable is something we can specify, like for a string, what will be the null value? It would be a empty string, right? That is something called null value. But these certain properties are internally nullable, so that is not an issue. But if the date and time is something which is not internally nullable. If you don't pass anything, if you are specifying a date and you have not set it to nullable, then you will get an error. That we will see sometime in picture. Like if I don't specify nullable over here, and if date and time is being passed as blank, I would get an error. So because default date value should not be 0000, because 0000 is a date, because 00000000. This is not a valid date, right? If I talk about a string, an empty string is still a valid value because I can have a blank string, but I can't have a date because this is not a valid date, right? So I have to set it to nullable, but I'll discuss it in some time. So after you have created an entity, you can generate the service. For it to use, its runtime artifact needs to be created. For that, we have to generate a particular service. So we have to put a cursor on this particular gateway project and click on regenerate. So while regenerating, it will create multiple classes. So model provider classes, it's MPC, which SAP has created. Then DPC, which is data provider class, which SAP will actually take care of. Now, whenever we want to write any sort of custom logic in our system or for our development, we have to write our logic only in EXT class, that is called extension class. And this technical model and service is something which would be referred whenever we are going to register any kind of service. So that is why the service registration, in the service registration section, you would be finding the technical model and technical service name. Do not change or do any sort of modification in DPC and MPC class. So it's a custom class, but still it's advisable not to change anything. Whatever kind of logic you have to write, you can just because there is a parent class and the child class, right? So this particular child class would be having all the methods which this parent class is actually defining. So you can redefine this method. It's override its custom logic, override and like write your custom logic, but do not change anything. in this DPC and MPC class. Reason being, whenever you are doing any sort of development, or let's say you are doing any sort of modification in gateway project, you have to regenerate it. So whenever you will regenerate, it will regenerate and create this MPC and DPC class again from the scratch. So whatever logic you would be writing would again be vanished. So it's better to write all the logic in DPC ext and MPC ext class. So this is a data provider class in which we would be writing most of our logic. MPC ext is something which is ultimately providing interface to our service, like what the system should be able to see. So mostly in MPC you won't be doing most of the stuff. There are certain things which you would be writing over. MPC ext would be least used. DPC ext is the one where we would be writing most of our data provider logic. So we can click on activate, and you can provide your package and specify the tier. If you provide a tier package, it would ask you for a tier. And there is a kind of warning, nothing but like it says potential loss of data, because it says SAP suggests if you don't need a data, then like if you are specifying a data, just provide its maximum length, because if you are not specifying maximum length, the memory allocation which SAP will does is it will assign it the full memory allocation it can provide. So there can be a loss of memory or which can occur. So that's why SAP says if you are specifying maximum length as 0, you will get this kind of warning. But it's a warning, so we can avoid it. So if you see, after generating the particular service, this is something called EDM, Entity Data Model. We can see this runtime artifacts getting generated. So this runtime artifacts is nothing but that we just found in, that we just show while generating the service in the pop-up DPC, DPC, ext, MPC, MPC, ext class. These are all the class, and this is the model and the service instance that we will use while registering a service. Second thing, for a service that I already mentioned, there can be multiple operations on a service. Let's say if for a particular purchase order, I can ask to get a particular data. That can be a read operation. I can query multiple data, let's say based on filter. That would be a query operation. I can create a particular entry. I can delete an entry, or I can update the entry. So that is what we call the CRUD queue operation: create, read, update, delete, and query. So this CRUD queue operation we can do. But whenever we are doing any sort of implementation, will the front-end system be able to reach it out? Like that is what we have to ensure. Like will the front-end system be able to reach our service? For that we have to register our service. So this is our service YE0, T01, and SRV. Over here in service maintenance, if you see, you have service registration status is blank, but I would keep my session as generic as possible. Okay, so what I'll do is I won't go in the service maintenance over here and register the service, because I already mentioned that we can have a embedded system and hub-based system. So it might be a case that like in this particular tutorial we are using embedded system, because the current system which we are using is embedded system, but the system in which you will be working while going in the live project is a hub-based system. So you should be knowing how to register a service in hub-based system. So we won't be registering the service from here. I would do that for you in a service maintenance transaction. So this is a particular transaction for service maintenance. Transaction for it would be IWFND main underscore service. This is how we would be maintaining a service. Okay, so main service, this is something which we would be following to maintain a service. Now how a service can be maintained, like these are all the service which has already been maintained. So these are all the components. We would be discussing other components in detail. So here to add a service, we have a button called add service. We can click on add service. We can add our service. For that we have to specify the system alias, because this is the same kind of UI you would be finding while deploying any service in the, or you can say registering any service in the hub-based system also. All you have to specify over here is a system alias. So for us, we don't have any RFC connections because we have backend system is same as that of the gateway system. So we can directly specify it as a local, and you can say get services. So it will give you all the list of services which has not been registered yet. Till now, the services which has not been registered, you will be finding all the services over here. But I want to filter my service, let's say YE0 and star, and I can press enter. So this is a service. BEP is the kind of your service type. Then it's a backend event publisher. Then you can have this particular technical service, and you can add this service, add selected service over here. Over here, the technical service name would be by default the service which we currently selected. You can rename it, but it's good to keep it as it is, because if you are the developer and you are kind of moving out of this project, you are moving on to another project, it would be easy for anyone to relate. Okay, this is a service name, and this is how he can find, because this is an external service name and this is internal technical service name. So if possible, keep it as it is. Then technical model name is something which was the model which was got generated. So this is just providing an interface to the service. You can provide a project to it. And ICF node is a kind of service registration. SICF is a transaction in which you can specify the service registry, and that particular ICF node would get generated automatically. Set current client as default client. Okay, then we can directly click on OK, because I've already done the package assignment. If you have if you are doing on a live project, you can specify a particular project, let's say whatever Z package you want to specify, so you can get it transported. Because in individual system, you do not need to register a service. You can register it in a development system and transport it afterwards. So it is transportable. So I can click on OK. So it says service has already been created successfully and metadata has been loaded. Okay. So if you see, I just came back over here. I can filter my particular list of services from here, YE0. So I'll find multiple services registered. So this is my service which I just registered, sample gateway. Okay. So if you see, these are the nodes. Like now ICF node, if you see over here, and I'll just now the one limitation which I have actually come across till now over here is the registration status won't reflect. Till now you have actually closed and reopen this particular. So this registration status is now turned to green. It means our service is perfectly registered, and the RFC destination is none, because we have the gateway project as well as the service registration in the same system. Over here, this is a service and this is a status of the particular oData service. Second thing, the system alias. So Gaurav was asking a question saying, if I have a multiple backend system, then what you can do is, if you are going to customizing over here, the system alias over here. In the SAP system alias, you can specify multiple backend system. Let's say if I have a different backend system for one ERP D1 client, D2 client, so you will find a RFC system over here. Let's say in some scenario, or let's say in some project, there might be a case saying, if I have a client, let's say 100, which is a default client, and after let's say 3 months, the data has been refreshed from production, and now I am working on let's say my testing client is 110. So you can directly go and change this particular service registration from here, and you can add a new entry and just uncheck this particular default system from it. So if you have multiple system aliases specified over here, you can set a default system, and that particular default system, based on its priority ascending, how on the sequence it has been specified, it will consider the default system. And hence you can select from multiple services. If you have a single hub system over here for a gateway registry and a different backend system, then you can specify it in the system alias, and that particular system would be referred while triggering a particular service. And so that is how it would work. Next thing, we'll talk about the service metadata. So I can directly taste the service by calling it in browser. This is the browser mode is kind of not supported because the base configuration is not done, but you can directly go in the gateway client. This gateway client is for testing purpose, and you can directly test any kind of service you want to perform. And these are all the operations that we would be discussing in upcoming lectures. First of all, let's understand a service. What is a service document? So if you see here, it is request URI which is specified. In this request URI, you can pass your header. So what I mentioned in earlier discussion, like a particular service, in the first discussion, a particular service would be having two components. It would be having request URI, or you can say header, and request body, or you can say payload. Okay, so this is the component where we can specify the request URI. Okay, so this is nothing but your uniform resource identifier. So it will identify your resource uniformly. That is why it is called uniform resource identifier. And this is what we call the payload. Let's say I just click on enter over here. It is giving me all the data. Now let's check all its information by specifying its metadata. Like metadata is nothing but your data about data. So what all information or whatever, what is the services this particular entity is providing, that we can specify. Okay, create a particular service and register it over here. My front-end developer was asking me for this, right? Okay, your application front-end developer said I want to develop a dashboard application for PO release report, which will give me a header information. So I'll check. Okay, I created a PO header entity which is giving me all this header information, and he just want a dashboard, so he don't want anything to be creatable. So I just created all these properties. So as an endpoint, what you can do is you can provide this information to your front-end developer that, hey, friend, this is the URI using which you can proceed with your development. So he won't need any other details. He won't ask you, hey, what are the list of properties that you specified, what set. He can directly go into metadata and check it. So your and his time will get saved. He can directly refer to metadata whenever you regenerate a service or add any kind of new information. Your metadata will get refreshed. It will get data in from here. So this is what we call metadata. Now our ultimate goal would be PO header information. This is something what we are currently looking for. Now if I go into this particular gateway service, in the runtime artifact, in the service implementation, I can see in PO header set can serve multiple purpose. It can it can perform multiple operations by this particular service implementation, which if I implement. So what we have to do is we have to redefine its service. So where I can redefine its service, so it says in the DPCXT class you can define this particular method. If I want to define get entity set for query operation, I have to redefine this particular method in this particular class. So what I can do is I can directly go in DPCXT class and I can redefine this method, because let's say I want all the purchase orders. So if I provide this URL to front-end developer, what he will do is he will just directly not bind the service. He'll say I want header information. Okay, this service is 10 number of entity. I want only a particular entity. So you can click select a particular entity set. I just click on this entity set for your information and just selected their entity set. So it will automatically get picked. If I want all the purchase order information the service is serving, I can click on enter. But what it says is this method is not implemented in data provider class. DPC class is something called data provider class, and this method is not implemented, so we are not getting any sort of data. So what we can do is we can go in DPCEXT. In the methods you will find inherited method, because I said DPC is the class which SAP will generate. It will generate all these methods, but if you want to override its logic, it is not written like, because SAP is not knowing what kind of purchase order details you want. So it is giving us some hook where we can actually redefine our own stuff. So PO header set get entity set, here we can right click and click on redefine. So this method will get redefined. So now let's say this is nothing but an object oriented concept. Let's say I have a particular object. Okay, I have a particular let's say first go with the class. I have a particular class, say parent class. I have a particular another class which is defined as a child class and its parent is parent class. Okay, now if I define an object for let's say parent class, and if I call a method, then what it will do is it will call a method from parent class because the object is of parent class. If I define an object of child class, if I define an object of child class and I call a particular method, let's say LO entity set, then it will call a method of child class. It will call a method of child class if it has been defined. If the method has not been defined, then it will reach out to parent, because till now the method has not been defined over here, right? So what it was doing is it was trying to reach out to the parent. So let's see whether it was reaching out to parent, from where we are actually getting the message. So this is the parent class, super class. I just went into super class. I just went into methods. If you see PO entity, here I have a get entity set. What it is saying is method not implemented. This is a text which is actually being written and this particular method name. So this parent is actually raising an exception, okay, of particular type, and it is getting written from this method. So this is a message which we are getting, and hence we can say that like this, as we have not defined the child class method, so parent class method is getting triggered, and as it doesn't have any kind of logic written over here other than this exception, we are getting this exception. Okay, so here what we are doing is, now we don't want any exception, so what we are doing is we are just redefining this method. I just redefined this method. I am not writing anything as of now. I just activate this method. Okay, and after activating this method, I am just kind of refreshing this. So it says status code is 20. It's in green, so 200 is nothing but a success code. It means the method it is trying to reach is properly reachable. Second thing, as we are not returning any sort of data, it is returning an empty body. But it is now green, so our method call is success and we are properly able to reach the particular method. Okay. Next thing we would be doing is writing a logic for this particular custom method get entity set. So for that we would be try to learn what this method can take and what this method can return. So if you go into PO header entity set and go into parameters, you will find all the list of parameters, because be it gateway or anything, it is nothing but a class, and it is having multiple attributes, multiple methods. If I have a method, it can have a parameter. This parameter can be of any type, be it importing, exporting, all those kind of stuff. Sorry. So this particular parameter is having particular method is having parameter of importing parameter. So here you can get entity name, entity set name, all this kind of information as an input. You can have, if I am passing something in key parameter, I'll get the key tab. If I have some sort of paging information, I'll discuss what all those components is. I'll get all this information. If I want to return something, I have to return it in ET entity set. ET entity set is nothing but my returning table, and this ET entity set would be of type the structure which I actually define in the definition. So in the method, in the source code, I can write its custom logic. Okay, let's say if I want to derive, or let's say return, let's say 10 purchase order data. So I can write my logic over here. I can write select, and I want to select all the data from EKKO, and I can write into corresponding fields of, let's say, table. And what is the name of the table? We'll write the for a new syntax, ET and TT set, and up to 10 rows, just to test whether the data which we are currently trying to retrieve is retrieved or not. So we just wrote this logic. We are retrieving the data from EKKO. We have many fields from here available in EKKO, but we just want to pass the fields which is currently available in its metadata only. So we are just saying into corresponding fields, and we are just activating it. So after activating it, if I again click on refresh, I am getting all the 10 records which is actually getting passed from here. So EBLN, all this information which is there is now being served from particular method output. So this is something how the particular purpose of this particular Fiori application. Let's say what was the statement of the front end developer. He says I want to develop a Fiori list report which will return me PO header information. PO header information lies on EKKO. So we are now returning the EKKO purchase order information. Our next statement is we want to filter the data on company code. So this is something which we are currently left to develop, which we would be doing further. So let's say it's 10:50. Let's again connect back at 10:56, and then we can again give a fresh start, and we can consider the rest of the stuff we are left for this lecture. Okay. Okay. See you all in next 5 minutes. Thank you. Mm, yes, Gaurav. To answer your question, Rahul would be circulating the recordings for the session, maybe by evening. Okay,
You
so are
have
we all
my
back?
email ID?
Can you hear me?
You have my email ID?
Am I audible? Because I'm not able to hear anyone of you.
Hello? You are audible, but there is some disturbance in the background.
Hello. I'll just start sharing my screen and maybe we can re-jump on a portion with that we left. Okay. So lastly, we redefine the service for DPC-EXT to retrieve all the information from a particular gateway service upon querying it from the gateway client. So where we actually define the service was IWFND main service. So to understand everything more clear, let's just have our main kind of tool of any database, any developer get activated. So let's just go into debugging mode and check what all information we are currently actually getting. So I'll just put an external breakpoint. Reason being, we are currently in the same system luckily, but while calling a particular backend system, the front end call would be coming from a web browser. Second thing, in a hub-based development, both of the system would be different. So if we put a normal breakpoint, the internal breakpoint, then we won't be able to reachable. So we have to put an external breakpoint only. What's the external breakpoint? We can press enter over here. Okay, And over here, if you see, we are getting multiple informations in a query. So you can directly go into the stack and go one step back to check. Okay, so this is somewhere where somewhere from where the get entity set method is getting triggered. So if you see, these are all the input parameters which we are getting. Okay, so we have the entity name which is being received as PO header, header set is entity set name, source name, and all those stuff. We have multiple parameters say for filter operation. So whenever we pass something as a filter, we would be receiving it over here. If we have some request of ordering our data, let's say if you want to order by our data ascending or descending, we would be receiving it the request over here. The paging detail, let's say we want to skip particular records and return just part of it. If you want to return the chunk of data only, then we will be receiving it in the paging information, the navigation part, the association and navigation that we discussed, the key information if you are receiving any. The filter operation, if you are receiving any, we would be receiving it in a two portion. We can either receive it in a filter select option internal table, which would be containing the name of the property and the select option, the range. Second thing, we would be receiving it in the filter string. So this filter string can contain the query operation that we are passing, the search string. So all this stuff which we would be receiving over here. Okay. Second thing, let's say if you want to get how many records are actually received as part of this particular resultant output. So what we can do is we can pass a URI operation. So all these options which we would be writing post this particular entity set, which we would call it as a URI option. So URI options. We can write slash then $count. It will go into your particular entity set, and while coming from back from there, it will give me the total number of records. So in this particular entity set, I am getting 10 number of records. So it won't give me all data, but the $count will give me the total number of records. Okay. Okay. So the $count would give me total number of records. Okay. So now let's complete the remaining half portion of the front-end developer's requirement. So what he's saying is I want to filter the data on company code. So for that, what is the URI? First of all, just retrieve all the data. In this all data, what we are seeing is EW01 and we are having 1003 BUKRS. Multiple company codes are being served. So I don't want all the data. Let's say front-end developer, if he is not passing anything, like if he is querying a set like this, feature screen, then I should get the data from all the company codes, else I should be able to filter the records. So for that, what is the mandatory thing which we have to perform? So for that, we have multiple URI option. This add URI option is for our help. Are we able to find the $filter over here? No, we are not, right? So what we can do is we can write it manually. We can write $filter without specifying any space. We can write an equal to. Then we can specify a name of the property. Then we can write lowercase eq, and then you can specify. Let's say I want to get data from EW01. I press enter. I am like reaching to this method. After execution, what is the data I am actually receiving over here? EW01. So the data is, because SFT is giving us a location where we can write our custom logic. Okay, but it's up to us. We should be humble enough to write the code logic of that particular method as per the input parameter. Let's say if I go into this particular method, if I come over here, inherited method, I have update entity, get entity, read, delete, and so this get entity would be returning a single record. This create would be creating, this would delete would be deleting, and update would be updating a record. But if you are writing an update statement over here, no one will stop you. If you are writing a delete statement over here, no one will stop you. So it's it's our responsibility to humble enough to write all the logic in the relevant method only. First thing. Second thing, in get entity set, let's say I want to filter a data. So to filter a data, I want if I am passing a dollar filter over here, because you might have read in hundreds of blogs saying if you pass a filter, dollar filter, and the name of the property and equal to, you would be able to retrieve the data in its particular, which would be filtered by that particular parameter. But will it be done automatically? No. We have to do some sort of coding for that. So if I press enter over here, after pressing an enter, I'll see what is the all input I am receiving. So over here, if you see in the stack, in IT filter select option, I am receiving one particular record which is containing the filter input which I am passing from the URI option. IV filter string which I am receiving, it is containing BUKRS is equal to this. So it is actually sending me the query which I have actually passed over here. IT filter select option is receiving all the properties saying BUKRS, and the standard table, this select option is nothing but containing the range. This is sign, option, low and high. Sign, option, low is nothing but a range for us, and we are receiving a range input, because tomorrow you can say that like I want all the data which don't I don't want the data BUKRS where company code is not equal to EW01. So you can't like go and handle one and each and every condition one by one, right? So that's why system is giving filter operation, and in this filter operation it is giving us the range. This range we can directly query in the particular table. So what we can do over here is we can directly use this particular range. So over here in the code, what I'll do is, I'm in edit mode. I'll just execute this, and as my system like just shut in between, my object is locked, so I'll just unlock that particular object first of all. I am just going into SHEW over here. So one more thing I would like to mention over here is, of course, it's we can navigate to the DPCXT from here, but it's a good habit to copy the class name and use SC24 as much as we can. Reason being, you might not be the only developer who will be working. So if someone want to do some change in gateway architecture, and you are going into change mode of this gateway, then changing the class, you don't want to do any sort of changes over here. Still you are waiting, you are making anyone else also to wait for you to complete your change. So it's better to go in the class and do all the kind of change you want to do directly in the class only. Okay, so over here, and whenever you are doing any sort of change in the gateway architecture, it's a good habit to reload the metadata using the load metadata. So whenever you are doing any sort of change, it would reload your changes. So what we are doing over here is we are like selecting a PO header set, and we pass the filter operation equal to BUKRS equal to, let's say, EW01. So we receive all the data. We are not getting the filter data. So our filter the data. So for we have to do is we have to, let's say, now remove the condition. We don't want 10 records. We want all the records, but we want the data to be filtered. So what we'll do is where your BUKRS is in, and let's say LR BUKRS. So this is a range that we have to specify. So for that we have to specify a particular range table over here. So LR BUKRS is type range of let's say EKKO dash BU KRS. So that is what we specified. Now our next target would be we want to read all the stuff from that particular LT filter option. So in the signature you can say IT filter select option. This is the kind of thing we want to read. So fill range value, we can directly loop at this particular table into data ls filter, and we can write when case we have multiple properties for filter. We can say if the property value is BUKRS, then we want to fill the value of this particular range. Why specify all the logic in loop? Reason being, it's not only BUKRS for which we would be writing the logic. We can have multiple filter parameters. So I'm just like making our code future ready. Okay. And as of now, as we only have a particular BUKRS, I can write exit to ensure the iteration. We are only looping onto one iteration. Okay. Then we can fill the value for LR BUKRS value hash, and then what we have is in filter we have a range table. Okay, sorry. For after this, I have to specify a line because this is a work area. Then in ls filter, I can specify the select option because select option is something where actually my range is actually getting stored. Okay. Then I have multiple. It's also a range, so it would be having sign option low and high. So what I'll do is sign. I would be specifying option over here. I would be specifying low parameter over here, and I would be specifying high parameter over here. Okay. So I feel we are done. So once we are done, we can directly run this code and check whether we are getting all the required output or not. For that, I just put a breakpoint just to ensure we are getting the required output. Over here, I'll just press again and enter. I am passing BUKRS over here. So let's see whether we are getting the correct information we are like looking for. In IT filter select option, you will see IT filter select option is coming up with property BUKRS. In the standard table, we are having a range, and that particular range I have to pass it on a query. So I can directly loop over here. If the property is BUKRS, yes, it is matching. Then LR BUKRS, using the new value syntax that we learned in last few weeks, we can directly utilize it, and we can fill the LR BUKRS. So if you see LR BUKRS, we are receiving sign option low and high as we have specified into the input. We are exiting from the loop. Over here, we are retrieving the data from ET entity set. We are getting 20 data. So if you see in the table level over here, all the records that we are receiving over here is from EW01 BUKRS only, and we can directly execute it. Okay. So this is how it will all work. So if you check the record, you will find that all the records that you are receiving over here is EW01 company code. You can change the condition anytime if you want to specify. No, I don't want data from EW01 company code. I want the data from company code from all other company codes. So you can specify not equal to over here. It will fill the range accordingly. LR BUKRS would be receiving a not equal to sign over here. If you see, I am receiving 457 records, and in this 457 record, I am not finding a single EW01 specified over here. If you want to check, you can like directly copy and pass the EW01. It says no matches found. Okay. So this is how the filter operation will work in IT filter operations. So one more thing, like after filtering the data, if you want to figure out how many records actually you have got over here, so there is one more URI option that you can add after it. It is say inline count all pages. Okay, so whenever you select these are the helper inline count option, helper URI options available in a gateway client. So this is nothing but a, let's say if I am developing a report, in a report what I'll be doing is I'll check all the scenarios by putting a breakpoint, testing all the stuff before handing it to a particular end user. But here we don't have a directly level of like a developer plus end user, right? We have a backend developer plus front-end developer plus end user. So after developing anything, you have to first test it by yourself in a gateway client. So this is what we call gateway client. You can directly go into main service, or you can directly go into the transaction IWFND GW client. That is the transaction code for it. Maybe underscore GW client. Here it is not mentioned. Maybe I'm not sure whether transaction code is activated over here or not. But yeah, GW client is a whether it is activated or not. Let's just check. IWFND slash GW client. Okay, so there is a direct transaction code. Rather than going into main service, you can directly come over here too. It is also feasible. So it's our responsibility as a backend developer to check whether all the kind of functionality which we are actually ensuring that okay, this will work, are they actually working or not. So this is something called we can call it as a UT part, unit testing. This unit testing will be done in a gateway client. So over here, if I want to get all the records count also as an inline count, because in a Fiori list report, as I say, it will work on a Fiori inbuilt SAP annotation. So this inbuilt annotation would be having a screen like this. Okay, so it would be having line item records as well as it would be having a particular caption over here. It would be having, let's say, P purchase orders. Okay, and it would be they would be showing some sort of count over here. So this count would be nothing but the total number of records. Okay, so this total number of records should also be visible. So first we need to ensure that like whether the inline count is actually getting written in the output or not, because otherwise the UI developer will say I am receiving the record but I am not receiving the count. Now we don't know how to return a count. So for that, inline count is one of the URI option that should be returning a correct value. So if I press and enter over here, execute over here, still I am not receiving any sort of inline count over here because that is not getting returned from the program. So what we can do is we can dig down into the parameters that we are currently having over here also. We have let's say ES response text. So we have to fill the number of counts over here. Fill details of number of records. Okay. So this particular parameter would be having, let's say, inline count, and you can return it as a lines, and then you can specify it as a ET entity set. So there is a new parameter. So whatever number of records the ET entity set is having, we can directly use the same. So if you see, what we are receiving over here is M count. So it is number of records which this particular entity is returning. This M count is that particular lines count which we would be passing into the output to ensure that the particular Fiori list report is receiving all the counts, and that can be done using the inline count operation over here. That is one more thing. then let's stick down onto the other URI options which are available. So this count we already seen, like after writing the slash count, we are seeing all the counts. Then, okay, let's say if we are not comfortable by using the operation of into Excel mode, XML mode, sorry. We want to see all the data in JSON format. So what I can do is I can write a dollar format JSON over here, press and enter. I don't want to go into debug mode as of now. So I'm just removing that particular. So if you see, I am receiving a JSON format. So as I already mentioned in the initial discussion, this particular oData would be returning the data in JSON or XML format. The XML format is the default one that we already seen. If you go into the UI application browser and check what is the kind of data they would be receiving, JSON, the browser is mostly comfortable by in using JSON format than compared to the XML format. So if you pass dollar format equal to JSON, you are not writing a single line of code for it, but still the data is getting converted to this particular JSON format. So there is a key value pair. Key is EBL and value is this key value. Key value, I am not saying key, it means primary key. Key means the identity of this particular value property. So what is this 45001? This is nothing but your EBLN. So this is a key value pair that you would be receiving over here. And this is something what we call the JSON format. Now let's say if you don't want a JSON format, you want a XLS format. You want the data in Excel format. You can directly write it over here. Add URI format this, and you can directly press enter, and you can click on response in browser because this is what it suggests. And after doing that, so the package is getting transferred, and that particular file is getting downloaded over here. Okay. Next thing we would be discussing on to is inline count. Then we already see the metadata. Now let's say we want to as a developer, right, by looking into a particular code or now by looking into request URI and data, we won't be able to get 100% of idea. Sometimes we run into issue and we want to identify what is the statistics or what is the issue that is actually getting generated. So there is one more option, SAP DS debug equal to true. Directly we can remove this all the stuff and directly write question mark SAP DS debug equal to true. You see, our screen would get changed a bit and we would be getting some additional sort of information which we are not getting earlier. So if you see, our screen has been changed. We are getting a body part. Body part is nothing but the default information we were getting over here. This is a header information, this is a body information. So this is the body information which we are getting in a normal Excel format, XML format, sorry. Then what is the request that is actually going? So we can say that like in the get part, we are getting a request for PO header set, okay, and this is a particular request which is getting. Then in the response, we can get the status code, the 200 status code which we are seeing over here. This is nothing but your response, and all the server related information which we are seeing over here. We can see that like directly in a particular debug mode. So this is nothing but a developer related internal information. Sometimes you might not be sure like why your system is failing or you are not getting the required output. Then you would like to dig down a bit, see all the internal parameters, request URI path and all those information. Then you can directly add this SAP DS debug equal to true, and it will give you additional information other than the one you were getting earlier. In the runtime, you will also get the stack, that how the ultimate call to your entity set is actually getting received. So if you see, the handle request is handling the dispatcher. That dispatcher is creating a service, and that particular service URL is parsed. And after the read call, a standard get entity set, read entity set is getting triggered, and post over here. If you see, you will be able to find a class name YCLE01DPCEXT, and get entity set is getting triggered. So let's say after getting all the 200 response, you are not still seeing the data. You can check on the stack. Over here in the stack, you will be able to find, okay, whether my request is actually my method is actually getting triggered or not. If your method is not getting triggered, then you won't be getting the data. till now it is only one method, so you will be sure that like, okay, my method will get triggered. But in future, or maybe as and when we try keep on progressing and expanding our gateway project that we develop, we would be implementing multiple methods. So in that method, which method is actually getting triggered and which is actually not, that we can directly derive from the runtime information over here. Okay. So this is something which would come to handy whenever doing some sort of analysis. So this is something what we call SAP DS debugger and all the URI option which would come handy. Okay. One more thing which I mentioned in the beginning of the lecture, but yeah, of course we didn't get a chance to look into it, would be nullable operation. Okay. So if you see over here, we have a string which can have a zero valid value, but in the records which we are currently getting, we don't have a date kind of creation date which is blank, because creation date will always be having some sort of information. So we are not able to identify whether if I don't specify nullable, will I get any issue or not. So let's import some sort of new parameters. Let's say okay, so this is a way. If I have a particular gateway service or a project or entity already defined, then if we have a requirement of adding few more fields, you have to ensure first thing is you have that particular field already available in the structure that you have specified over here. Second thing, you can have to click on a right click, import and properties, and over here and all fields that are available in the structure. So let's say if I want to check BE date, I am importing multiple date fields over here just to show you that if any of the date field is not available, then we can run into some sort of issue that we have to overcome. How, that I'll show you in a minute. Because these are the one of few of the basic errors that any developer would be getting. So whenever you are doing any sort of change over here, it's a good habit to like reopen your main service and regenerate or reload the metadata to ensure that the kind of information you are getting is the latest one. Okay, I can say load metadata. Oh, sorry, it was a different service. I can say load metadata. It has been loaded successfully. I can go into SAP Gateway Client. Okay, over here, if I just want to retrieve the EKKO set, still I have. Okay, so that is one more thing which I missed. I just added the fields over here, but I didn't regenerate the structure. So I have to generate the runtime objects again. Whenever you are doing any sort of change in the interface over here in the gateway service, you have to regenerate the runtime object. Because all this information is actually based on some cache information, so sometimes the cache didn't get cleared, so you have to wait for some time till the time the information is start getting reflecting. So let's see, we have no information is still not reflecting. So Okay. So we are getting those information now. Maybe BDAT, then KBDAT, then K date. Okay. So validity, start date, end date, all those stuff. So sometime whenever we are running into issues saying like whenever whatever changes we are doing is not reflecting, you can remember this C code, but you like sometimes we don't have all the authorizations. So there is a cache cleanup. So whenever there is any changes being done in a model level changes, because it is a kind of architecture of the gateway service. If the any changes are being done in a model level, then sometimes it doesn't get reflect due to the older cache that has been loaded. So you have to clean up that cache. So this is a transaction code cache cleanup that you can do, and it should maybe you should be able to see the latest information. So PO header set I'll be retrieving now. So over here if you see, yeah, this is what I was actually trying to emphasize on. It says while retrieving the data, in the context of data service, an unknown error has occurred. What is the context of data service? This is a data service. One second, let me just go to the gateway. Okay. So this is a gateway. In this gateway, if you see, there is a context. Like if I have an entity, what would be its context? Its context would be list of properties. These are the properties. So while filling the data, it is receiving some sort of data which is not matching its defined property over here. So you said I want to retrieve the data. So I am getting this information because the data which is coming, let's say in let's say date time, there might not be some valid sort of date which would be coming. So what I have to do is I have to just go and check the error log. What is the error? So if you see over here in error log, you are saying the property KDABT has invalid value 8 times zeros. Because for date, 0 is not a valid date, right? There doesn't exist any day in the world where the date is 0. So these are invalid dates. So first you have to set, okay, though the value is 0, it's not a date. It means that there is no data for it that you have to specify. That is what the purpose of nullable is. So to avoid all this kind of error, it's good habit. Whenever you are specifying any kind of data type which is of date time, you have to set it to nullable. It's a good habit, and maybe you would see this error more often if you don't specify it, and maybe in future you would learn to set it to nullable true. Because for string, a blank would also be a value. I can have a particular text specified, or I can have a user who like whose name is not specified in the system. That's still valid, but a date with a 0 value is not a valid date, and that's why we have to set it to nullable. Now, after changing anything over here, I have to regenerate the service. After regenerating the service, I can't directly go and execute over here because it would be having its in the cache the data it would be having about the service metadata would be the older one. So what I have to do, I have to just close this error log. I can directly go into the main service and regenerate the or reload the metadata. I can directly go into SAP Gateway Client, retrieve the PO header set information. Okay, and now I am getting all the, after specifying this, all the dates for which the date, like I specified AE date, for AE date also I specified nullable is equal to true, but it is as it is having data, it is retrieving the data. But if the particular date is not having any sort of data, it will say, okay, it is null, but the value is true because it is set to nullable as true. So this is how we can handle any sort of information. As in when you will get more experience in oData development, you will find some sort of error very familiar. By seeing a single statement, you will be able to say, okay, this would be the error. Sorry, this would be the base root cause. That's why you are getting this particular error. So all will come by experience. So maybe this was all about today's session. We can discuss any queries if you are having. Yeah, Rakesh, Gaurav, Shweta, are we all clear? Are we good with today's session, or do you have any query you can ask?
Yeah, Shumit, I have a query.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
So, like that now, whenever we are using add URI option, so in the SOM option, whenever we are debugging it, and you so that if we can use the standard URI option which is provided by the services or the oData services, so that time it should be come as a $sign and followed by the URI options, right?
So that is how
Yeah.
SAP has actually defined. Certain options SAP has defined with dollar, certain SAP has defined without dollar. So it's SAP's documentation which you are following.
Okay. So if there will be no documentation, then it should come with a question mark, right?
No, that is not the thing. So these are not the formats which we have defined. These are the one which are actually kind of SAP has added over here to just to help you out. I don't want to remember, let's say, the dollar format or dollar inline count. These are the one which are being used mostly, the usual use. So SAP has actually give a shortcut over here. Let's say for dollar filter and all, SAP has not given a shortcut. So we have to remember it by heart. That like, okay, I can use the dollar filter over here and I can write. And the format would be dollar filter equal to a particular value. And if I want to specify any kind of new URI, I can specify, okay, dollar filter BUKRS equal to something. And then I can specify and specify the multiple conditions. If I want to specify some sort of other URI option, I can write this AND operator and I can add that particular, let's say SAP DS debug equal to true, whatever information. So this is the format of URI.
Okay, so there will be no spaces in between any of the statements, right? Any of the words or.
Yeah, wherever possible, like a BUKRS, and this is the kind of property and this is the operator. So there will be a space, but if you are specifying a new URI option, then between two URI options there won't be any space.
And what it means by the question mark here in the header state is there no question mark is there. So
let's say if question mark is nothing but a like human language. Like if I want to specify PO header set, it means give me all the information. Now if you are saying no, don't give me all the information, then the question mark would be what all information you want to get available. So you have to specify question, then URI option. So whatever operation or whatever URI operation you want to perform on a particular entity, you have to specify question mark after the entity set name. Then whatever URI operation you want to specify, then and then the second URI operation, let's say second URI. Then again, and so first the format would be entity set name, then question mark, and then whatever is the name of the URI, then and then second URI if you want to apply is the third URI if you want to apply. Likewise, if you see, I have applied 2 or 3 URIs in the single line. So that's how you can do.
And how these things are consumed in the program, because whenever we are doing the development, we cannot go into that gateway of gateway T code, and we can do that in a programmatically. How will we handle it if we write this filter option in the get? If I want to.
That's what we did, right? That's what we did, right? We just went into this particular program. If you see, this is something gateway client. In this gateway client, these are the kind of URI options. Now, how this particular format is getting converted into a particular input parameters of this method, that is something which SAP is taking care of at its base development level. That is where SAP's development come into picture. That is something which is not visible to us because we know SAP has done all its development in C++ language. So SAP is now converting all the requests which we are getting over here into a method's input parameter. So all we have to actually deal with is a input parameter for this method. Whatever input parameter we would be receiving over here would be ultimately Bible for us. We would be taking it as a user's input and we would be performing all the operation. Filter operation I am passing over here, SAP is segregating it. SAP is saying I will give you all the filter operation over here. If you are getting any kind of please.
So we can fill the filter option table as well, right? In the program, means based on our criteria, we can pass the filter option, and we can do that, right?
Okay, perfect. Now tell me. Next, I have a question. Now tell me, how will you fill a filter option till the time you are not knowing what user is asking? Like you can fill the range filter over here because you know this is user's input. This is nothing but user's input which SAP is converting into ABAP's format for us. This is user's input. Now, if over here I am not referring to IT filter select option, I just want to avoid whatever is receiving into IT filter select option, but I want to fill my filter select option. Then whatever SAP, whatever input user is providing, I am avoiding it and writing my own code logic. What is the meaning of writing my filter select option over here? My filtering option, because I don't know what is the input I am receiving from the user. All the input which I am receiving. Yeah, please.
So
Hello.
So use this hello. To use this oData services, if the user there is a requirement to consume the oData services in the program, then how will do that? How will be? You mean to say that if you are saying that I need to go to that gateway services and there we need to execute the URI, right?
Right.
So in the programmatically, how I will be call that based on our requirement that URI from the program, and that output will get filled up.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the output. Okay, so that's the thing. Look, our work, after development, after introduction of UI5, roles are two segregated one. Earlier in SAP GUI, if I say, in SAP GUI there were two different kinds of there was only one role. We were doing the backend development for all the code logic. We were doing the screen designing also.
Yes.
Okay. Now over here, after introduction of gateway, we won't be doing the screen designing. We would be doing all the backend development only. So what is the backend development? In the backend development, we have to handle only CRUD queue operation. What is create, read, update, delete, and query. Now, how this particular URI will be reached out, because a user won't be going into the gateway client and executing this URI, right? But this URI will reach out to us by using the front-end development. So in the front-end development, I can say SAP UI5. SAP UI5 has a MVC architecture. Now, what do you mean by MVC? It's it has multiple views, and these views has, let's say I have a default view for, let's say, PO details, and it has a controller linked to it. So its controller will ultimately having a script. It would be written in a JavaScript or XML or whatever sort of it. Mostly it would be JavaScript. From this JavaScript, they can connect to our backend service using the URI, because what I wrote over here is you have to provide this URI to your front-end developer. So by this service, they can connect to a backend service, and from this backend service, they can say, okay, from this view, user is saying, okay, give me all the data for BUKRS equal to 1010. So earlier you were receiving the information saying PO header set. Now the front-end developer will add $filter equal to the BUKRS value over here. So this is the front-end developer's part, and this is the what we are currently learning into oData is our backend developer's part, and this is the part of backend developer, the CRUD key operation. How this URI will get triggered, that is front-end developer's part. But to ensure that whenever front-end developer is triggering a request, it is working perfectly, we have to do this UT. This is a unit testing we are doing over here. But ultimately, after the after the development has been done, no one would be going into gateway client and executing. This call will actually happen from front end, and we will be receiving this particular call directly. So this is our earlier role, and this is our new role. So this is our new role we would be doing backend development only. If you are into full stack development, then you would be doing backend as well as the front end. Okay. So this is a course for backend oData. So what we will be doing is we will be developing this oData service. We would be checking whether the oData service that we have developed is actually working or not. The same way front-end developer would be triggering the request, and he would be getting the required data. You won't be consuming a gateway request in a report and directly showing the data in a SAP GUI screen. If you want to do that, there is also a scope. If you want to design a gateway service, then you won't be calling registering a gateway service over here. All you can do is, there is a PO header entity set method inside a DPCHT class. So you can instantiate particular data LO something object into new, and you can specify the class name, and this you will get an object, and after you have object, you can call any method you want. So this is a way of, but ideally whenever you are defining a gateway object, you are defining a method, or you are writing any code logic,
you won't be calling it from a report. You would be calling it from a front-end application, and from the front-end application, this request will get triggered. Are we clear?
The front-end application
Yes,
means you mean to say that gateway, right?
No, that is not the front-end means like for SAP UI, what is front-end? For a module pool program, or let's say for a report, there is a selection screen, right? This
Yes,
selection
yes.
screen is front-end. Front-end is something which user would be seeing.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
this selection screen is the front end for report. But after introduction of Fiori, you might have heard of Fiori, you might have heard of SAP UI5. These are all browser-based applications. So user would be able to see its create button. So this is how the front end application would look like. I would let's say if I have a particular screen, I would have a like consider only this as a
Sumit, just for disturbing you. So how
no.
if let's say I have developed one project and I have given this project to the customer. So customer should have to know about these things, or customer
Perfect.
will like
Perfect.
SAP program. We can pass the input parameter and we'll get the result. So like that it will be user friendly, or whatever we are doing it in the URI option. URI option we are filling up each and every detail. So user have to know about that, or how we can
that's the
user
thing.
interface.
That's the thing. So earlier we were having developer plus end user, where you were developing something and giving it to end user, right?
Yes, yes.
This was our earlier scenario. Now we won't be developing and directly giving it to end user. There is something called front end developer.
Okay.
We are backend developer. Okay. Plus front end developer would be there. So whatever we are doing, like the gateway project that we design a gateway project, we registered a service, then we will hand over this service to a front end developer. Now this front end developer will again design a UI application, the front end application. Like I want to design a report. So this report development we won't be doing. It is something what the front end developer would be doing. This front end developer would consuming our gateway service.
Yes.
Gateway service, and ultimately it will also create an application. It will be deployed on a particular web browser. That application name, like if I want to hand over something to end user, what I'll hand it over to him? I'll give him, you can use the application purchase order report, and this purchase order report he can search on a Fiori launchpad. In a Fiori launchpad, he will be able to see the screen. He won't be knowing what is gateway. He don't care what is gateway. He don't care what is service. He don't want what is URI. He don't care what is your gateway client. All he care about is his particular application, and that is what a front-end developer would be developing. All we need to do is front-end developer won't be able to reach out to database directly. We have to help the front-end developer do all the operation. Like front-end developer is the person who would be receiving all the command. He would be passing it to us. We would be ultimately doing all the operation with how the front-end developer is guiding. He is saying, I want all the purchase order information. We would do it. He said, I want a purchase order information, but I should be able to filter it based on a company code. So we should have to provide a filter which can take care of the company code filter. After all this has been done, he will develop a UI application. This UI application will have a URL associated to it. This URL, browser level URL associated to it. This URL will be ultimately conveyed to the end user, and this end user would be happily using that front end application and not the gateway service. Are we clear?
Okay, so you mean to say that front end developer will make the screen or whatever, means whenever he will be execute the URL, it should be user friendly, and he will enter the data based on the requirement and get the result.
Perfect. He will enter the data. Look, he will design a view. That will be the end user screen. Now whatever input user is providing, he will again convert this particular user's input into the URI parameter. This is purchase order header set. This is what front end developer will do, and it will ultimately reach out to here, this gateway client. This gateway client ultimately translate it to our code input parameters. So this is what SAP will do. So there are multiple stakeholders in place before it reaching it to end user.
So being a developer, we are the backend developer for gateway, or we are a front end developer plus backend developer?
We are backend developer, because as an ABAPer, like what is my experience till now, or what would be your experience till now? Would be you would be knowing ABAP multiple, then you would be knowing application server processing and all those stuff. But are we good to do all the development for HTML5, JS, Node.js, Ajax, all those stuff, or let's say Fiori, jQuery, and all those stuff? So this is something are the competency required to do the front end development. So if you start learning on it, if you know the back end, if you know the front end, then we can get converted to full stack development. If you know both, we can be termed as a full stack developer.
Okay.
As we are only doing the back end stuff, we are only known as a back end developer. The front end developer don't know what is ABAP. He don't know how to write a select query in ABAP, how to handle the filters. That's why we are here. We will be doing back end stuff. Front end developer would be doing this stuff. He will be just passing on to query, and we will be receiving it. He'll be receiving the data.
And let's say in the ABAP, whenever we are developing any object, so we'll get the requirement. So who will get the requirement? We will get the requirement from the end user.
It depends on your project hierarchy. Let's say if you have a small team, then you would be, let's say there would be a team leader who would be receiving a requirement. But of course, let's say if I am a developer, okay, I have a base knowledge. I don't know how to develop a UI, but I know okay, this step can be done in UI. Let's say if he is saying I want a screen, I know it's a front end designing, so I'll pass it on to the front end developer. He say that I want a button of create. I know that a front end developer would do. But after click on a create and save, I want a purchase order to get created, but that can be developed only on a backend. So I'll ask a backend developer to develop a gateway service which can take purchase orders parameter and create a purchase order. So I have to write all the logic on my backend method. So I can guide a backend developer saying, hey, develop an entity which can take all this list of purchase order parameters, create a purchase order and return its purchase order number. So that purchase order number ultimately will be visible on a front end screen. So I'll return it to the front end developer. So it's multiple stakeholders who are involved.
So we'll get the requirement from the front end developer, right? Because they are designing something, and based on that we need to develop on the back end, and we have to hand over the things to the.
So it's not the only front end developer's responsibility. It's not only back end. It's all about the coordination part. You should be well coordinating with your. Because while developing a solution, if you say I'll design an entity and ensure that my logic is optimal so it will get executed faster, but he says I want all the data in a single step. User won't click 3 times, so you have to write all the logic in a single method. So it's all about coordination. A front-end developer, while doing all the development, all the time he should be communicating to backend, and all the time we should also be communicating to front-end developer. So all the time this both backend and front-end developer should be well communicating. So this is a part of coordination. Ultimate, you would be getting requirement from your, let's say, project manager or team lead. He would be having a base knowledge of both
front end,
like he want front end and back end. He would be knowing, like I can't say he'd be able to code both of the stuff, but he would be able to segregate what is a part of back end person, what is a part of front end person. So he would be able, he can behave as a mediator, and you back end and front end has to coordinate and do the stuff.
Okay, let's say BA having that knowledge of both, so that based on that he will give the part of the backend developer and he will give the part of the front end developer, right?
Yeah, right. And maybe as per our day by day after your experience, you can get the requirement, and you as a backend and front end developer can coordinate with each other, and you will say, okay, all the business logic I would be writing on a backend system, all the user action logic I would be writing on the front end. So it depends on your project hierarchy. Ultimately, we will have a application. We will have a requirement. Our ultimate goal is to deliver an application, but we won't be able to do it on a single hand because we don't know front end, and the front end developer won't be knowing the back end.
Like in ABAP, we are doing as a front end and back end, both we are doing it. So that's
perfect. Yeah, we are doing both the things. Yeah, of course. As an ABAPer, we were doing both earlier while designing a screen. But today that is not the case, right? As the technology is evolving, we should be maybe be up to mark with the new technology trend.
And its front end is a UI5, right?
Front end means UI5, right? SAP UI5. Okay. So are we clear?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, maybe day by day when we start developing all the application, you would be more comfortable, and maybe in upcoming lectures we would be discussing it. Okay.
So the next session should be also for the oData services, right?
So we have divided all the course curriculum into two weeks. In the first 2 weeks we learn ABAP 7.4 and 5. Now we would be learning today, tomorrow, and the next Saturday, Sunday we would be learning oData.
Okay.
So we'll be
Then
having 4
after
sessions.
CDS?
Then CDS, then AMDP. ABAP stack would be over. Then we would be learning on jumping onto data stack, HANA stack. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
So Sandeep, Sumit, I will talk with
Rahul.
with them, Sandeep or Rahul, and I will try to push the session.